Welcome to the Country Place Greenhouse program. We are located directly across from the Lebanon Springfield Airport on Highway 55. Now today I'd like to talk a little bit about what we're doing in Lebanon. The city of Lebanon does a program where they have hanging baskets or patio pots, and I just want to show you some of the things that they do, and I think it's really very positive for the city to go ahead and do these programs. It's, matter of fact, been so positive that it's caught on in Springfield also, and we're starting to do the programs there. But these pole baskets, as you might call them, look real good. This one is on some vinca and then some sweet potato vine that we have in it. We also have a few other things in it. And some of the baskets we use lantana, and then we use this ivy that adds a lot to it. So I think that's a real positive thing to do in your community, to go ahead and have things as such, because it adds quite a bit of beauty to the town. It's a challenge sometimes with the heat and the weather that we have to deal with, but we've been able to come along real good. Now we'll move down, we'll show you some other pots that we do. These, we also have some planters, or big pots really, that we planted. This is out in front of the City Hall. We have the dragon wing begonia, which grows really good. It only takes about 80% sunshine. It needs to have a little bit of shade during the day at some point in time. Of course, vinca does very well in the sun, and that's what we'll show you in the planters that we have along Main Street. And I think that they grow, and they're real nice, and they stay real pretty for all the summer really. They really do come along. And then of course in the fall, when it gets to be real cold, we'll replace these with pansies, and then in the spring we have to replant pansies, because pansies do not live well in cold temperatures when you have in pots above ground. Now we'll move over to some of the bigger concrete urns. What we have here is the large concrete urns, and again we use the vinca, or periwinkle as some of you might know it, and it does very well again in the hot, and it does real good on the street level, and it flows down and it's got a nice look. We also put a spike in the center of it. That adds a little bit of height to it. And then we have some penta in the back. Now we're going to go down to another one where we use the begonias in the back, but just to give you an idea of the different looks that we're trying to get along Main Street. Here, the basic difference on the pots or urns is we put the dragon wing begonia in the back again, but now this thing grows so much I got to trim it back somewhat, because it grows too vigorously and will actually overtake the whole pot if you allow it to. So that's one thing you got to keep in mind when you're putting dragon wings. You got to be careful how you use them. They can get so big and grow so vigorously that it does become a problem where you got to trim them. And it's no problem to trim them. You can go back to where a leaf is, and another leaf here down here, and just break it off, and heck fire, you won't even know it's gone. You know, you can go ahead and do that, and that's one thing you can do to these dragon wings. You can break some things out of it, some branches out of it, and there's no problem whatsoever. Well, this gives you a good idea of what they're doing over here in Lebanon, and also in Springfield we're doing the same thing, and I think it's a real benefit for the town, and a real added attraction, and a very positive effort the city is making to make their town look more beautiful and more pleasant. One thing we do want to talk about here at the greenhouse, and that is mums. Mums, this is the mum season, and a little later on the pansy season will come in. We're starting to plant the pansies. But one thing when you're buying the mums right now, you want to be sure not to buy a mum in full bloom, unless you're having a party or need to have it for a special occasion. It's a whole lot better to buy a mum when it's just barely cracking color, so you can see the color. I know you like to see the color on them and go from there. But this is very important about mums, because with this heat and all we're having right now, especially the mums, if they're in full bloom, they will go out of bloom a lot quicker. Later on, about mid-September, then we switch over. You can buy them more in bloom at that point in time because the weather is cooler, as you well know. When the weather is cooler, then you can go ahead and they'll last longer. But right now, if you buy a mum in full bloom, do not expect it to last all through the fall season because it just won't. But again, if you need them for a party, you want some quick decoration, there is some out there that are blooming and ready to go for you. Ours are mostly in just bud stage, and they're coming along, and we've got 30,000 mums, so we have a good selection, and we try to keep a good selection in front of retail all the time. And there'll be different varieties as we go through the season, because you have an early blooming mum, you have a mid blooming mum, mid-season, and then you have a late one. So those are the three things that we have to look at. Now we're going to take a look at some flowering kale. On the flowering kale, we call it flowering kale because it does change colors as the season goes on. Some of it will be red, white, different colors. But this will come up and be quite nice. Some of it is more like a cabbage that will work out and be like a big cabbage head. So those are the two different kinds you see. But we do have quite a bit of kale coming along. We got more coming, and we got some down here at this end of the table. It's more of a leafy type, and it's kind of pretty too because it will turn more reddish color, and we'll have these available. And these are running $4 a pot is what they are. This one's kind of tall, but then again that will give a lot of color, and I think that that's something that you can use in your fall color, and they are a little different. Now we're going to move on. I'm going to show you again. I've talked about this many times before, but trimming petunia baskets. You know, sometimes people think that you have a limited selection, a limited time, but really a petunia basket can be made to go all summer. And there is ways to do it. It's like on this big basket here, we trimmed that one back about 3 weeks ago, and you can see how big it is already. And so what you do when you trim a basket, I've got some here that I've just trimmed up here recently, and these are smaller, but these are baskets that, I'll just move a basket down here. You can see where we trimmed it, where we cut it off here right at the edge, and you can see where it's already starting to grow out. Now what you got to do is to remember to fertilize it. You can use most any kind of fertilizer. I'd fertilize it every time I water. Now don't over fertilize it, just go with what the directions are in the package. You know, a little bit is good, and then a lot is sometimes not if you don't follow directions properly. So make sure you follow directions, and then you can have a basket that will look again very pretty, especially if your baskets have got long and stringy. But you'll have a basket that look like these over here that have been cut back, and they'll give you really with a little bit of trimming on it, they give you flowers all the way up through frost. Now on the cool crops, we have a good selection of cool crops, and they still can be planted. There's still plenty of time for them to go ahead and develop. This is the broccoli. A lot of people like broccoli, and it's a real good food value to it, and you can go ahead and plant it. Now one thing I do want to caution you about, when you see little white butterflies floating around on top of it, that means that it's laying, of course, eggs, and these little eggs will develop into little cabbage loopers. So you can use Dipel or some material like that. Dipel works pretty good. It's a very common thing you can pick up in town, and it works very, very well, and it's very safe to use. So that's one area that you can go ahead. We got the broccoli, the cabbage, the broccoli, and cauliflower, and Brussels sprouts. So those would be the three items you have. Well, I'd like to thank you for listening to the Country Place show today. I'm Bernie Borbo with Country Place, directly across from the Lebanon Springfield Airport on Highway 55.